You're listening to ChristianLivingRadio.com. If you'd like to get your show, your ministry on the air, please contact us at 520-812-6363 or write to us at info@ChristianLivingRadio.com. And now back to the show.
Hi, this is Joanne with Unashamed by Grace, and today we have some amazing guests with us that are going to be talking about sex trafficking. How often do you hear that discussed on the radio? Probably not very often. And I didn't know much about it either until I was able to bring these ladies in and hear both of their amazing stories and what they're doing here in Arizona. So let me introduce Marilyn Parker and Carrie Jackson with International Defensive Training Systems, IDTS, here in Arizona. So Marilyn, tell us a little bit about this foundation and what it does.
Basically, we're a nonprofit organization, and we train women and children in anti-assault, anti-abduction, and anti-sex trafficking. We start training from the age of 5 on up. We do the psychological, verbal, and physical education. So it's prevention. We want to get the prevention out there before we have to go to a rescue.
That makes total sense, right? With anything, we want to be preventative. Just like my husband and I, we are ambassadors with Covenant Eyes, which is putting apps on phones and computers, and that's preventative. You know, although some kids, adults have already seen things, we want to be preventative in that as well.
You're listening to Unashamed by Grace with Joanne Pelcher, right here on ChristianLivingRadio.com.
All right, so before we continue on, I want to just kind of elaborate a little bit on sex trafficking, the basics, because, you know, I don't know anyone that's ever been in that. I don't have any experience or any knowledge, and there might be some other people that are listening that are the same as me. Tell us a little bit, like, as far as sex trafficking here in the United States, is it men? Is it women? Is it, do they just abduct a certain age? You know, where do they pick up children? How does that all work? Tell me about the workings of that.
Well, unfortunately, Joanne, there's a misconception out there about sex trafficking, and everybody looks at the predators or the pimps as just men, and that's not true. There are a lot of women that are involved in this, and the reason for that is, well, they all have their own agenda, you know, whatever it might be, whether it be their own sexual deviancy, whether they're under control of a pimp, or if it's financial, you know, because a lot of money is being made off of our women and children.
Right. I could see that being a big factor for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And so it just kind of snowballs, you know. It actually, you have to go backtrack and start, where does this really start at? And it all starts with our children being sexually abused. 1 in 6 children are being sexually abused. And 1 in 4 of those are at some point in their life are going to become a predator, whether it be in their, you know, child to child abuse, teenager to child, or if something triggers them as an adult. And so that just kind of rolls on from there. And then we end up with statistics, you know, from there is at least half, or at least 60% of the children that are abused, they are the ones that are most likely to be trafficked, you know, as they get older. Because what happens if they're being they're being sexually abused within their own families or their own inner circles, they are going to run away from home. So 95% of those run from home. So then we end up with about 300,000 kids on the streets in the United States. And we're not talking international, we're talking on our own backyard. And what happens from there, a third or 100,000 of them are going to be forced into sex trafficking.
Well, I know you mentioned earlier before the show started, we were talking about this, and you said, you know, a lot of us see missing posters, let's say at Walmart or the post office, but that doesn't represent the entire group of abducted children that are actually put into sex trafficking, right? You mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the problem that we have with that is because you see that missing posters, and there's a lot of kids that are being abducted that are not found. A lot of them are being, you know, trafficked. But here's just a statistic for you. Every 40 seconds, a child is abducted. 74% of those are dead within 3 hours. 88.5% of those are dead within 24 hours. Where's the remaining? They are either being trafficked. Now, this is just for abduction alone. This isn't about the ones who are being lured and coerced into trafficking. This is just abduction alone. So you have that remaining. They're either being trafficked or they're being held as a sex slave by somebody for their own sexual gratification.
So you're talking about abduction, and our focus right now here on Unashamed by Grace for the last couple months has been educating parents. It's something we really want to do, and as a parent, my son's 18, but there's a lot of parents who may have young children. What can we do to tell those parents right now how to protect their children even more so than they're doing already?
Well, a lot of it, there's a couple of different things. One is know at all times, where is my child and who are they with? Because it may be somebody, 80% of your abductions, 80% of your molestations are done by family or family friends. So who is my child with? Where is my child?
Yeah.
I have to understand these guys are cold and calculating. They're hunting our children 24/7. We go to work every day, and so do they. We can do another show where we can get into predator profiles. There's so much information that IDTS has to share. We do classes. We train, parents. And that's what Carrie does, is the inside the mind of a predator, so it's the education, telling parents, teaching them how to identify who the predators are, how they target, what do they do. Don't let your kids, everybody lets their kids go into the bathroom by themselves. If you knew the statistics of people out there that are looking for those children, they're hunting.
Well, when my son was young, we used to go to Kiwanis Park in Tempe every once in a while, and someone, I don't even know who, had just casually mentioned, oh, don't ever go into the bathrooms there, because I guess back then that was a well-known area for things like that to happen. And not that I ever let my son, when he was young, go into the bathroom by himself. I would always go, or my husband would go. But just, little things like that I was always careful with. But I can see there's just a multitude of things parents have to be careful with. It's not just letting them go into a public restroom by themselves. Carrie, do you want to elaborate? Like, what are some other things that parents should be aware of? What about going home from school? They're walking home from school, riding their bike. Is that ever an issue?
I think the main thing, one of the things that I really learned as being a parent is if a child's walking home from school alone or with a friend, because some of these predators think that's even a bigger challenge, is getting, a couple kids. So if somebody drives up alongside your kid, you teach them to turn and run the other way. Because that car has to either turn around, they have to get out, so they have to turn and run the other way. And it's just practical things like that of parents learning to teach their children. That is my passion of...
Sure, preventative, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So Marilyn said knowing who your children are with, being careful at public places, and then Carrie, you were saying, children walking home from school. What are some other things that I'm just not thinking about here that parents can be aware of that maybe haven't thought about before?
Well, a lot of that also has to do with our cyber safety. We also do cyber safety training. Parents have to be aware there are places on their phones that they can hide things that parents aren't aware of. I'll give you that information, and you can put that up on your Facebook. Watch your kids on their phones. Watch your kids, on their laptops. Be aware of who they're online with, because these predators, these kids don't even understand that there's predators out there. They're posing to be a 15, 14-year-old friend, when in all actuality they're a predator, and their goal is to get that child alone. Bring them out, and that's where the grooming goes on. There's manipulation, there's coercion, there's sextortion. There's so many avenues, so many things that they're targeting our children. Our children, like I said, it's an epidemic, and they are at risk at all times. I wanted to cover something real quick. It's called optimism bias, and we deal with this on a daily basis. And basically what that looks like is, it won't happen to me, it won't happen to my child, and it won't happen in my neighborhood or my community.
So not true.
That is not true. Unfortunately, violence knows no boundaries. And they are looking for your child, and it's just, you have different types of predators, and I really would like to get into that. But it's really in-depth. And that's some of the things, the trainings that we do, is that in-depth study of who they are and how they assault, how they attack. We also do the critical self-defense. IDTS got a chance to sit down with convicted rapists, child predators, and sex traffickers. And across the board, when what we found out from their disclosure is how they do. We asked them not why, but how. Right. How do you do what you do? And they didn't change across the board. The only thing that changed was their motive. Why they were doing this.
Everyone had a different motive, but the reasoning was all the same.
Well, their technique was the same. I mean, we're talking about luring, coercion, the whole 9 yards, but also physically. And so with that, I came back to Arizona, and I hired a group of combat athletes here in Arizona, and we took it to the mats based on their predatory methods, and we built a system that breaks their methods of assault and abduction, sexual assault. So if I reach out and I grab Carrie by the arm, her first instinct is to pull away. And that's exactly what, this is what they told us. So they know how to control that woman or that child. And the second thing they told us is that next thing that they were waiting for was actually for a woman or child to try to do the eye gouge, the groin kick, the foot stomp.
All the usual things that you're taught for many years, right?
So we built something based on their predatory methods of control points and carry methods. And that's how we teach. So it's education, educating the parents, educating the kids, psychologically, verbally, and physically, with their core techniques. It's quick, it's easy. Carrie's nieces and nephews have gone through, her boys have gone through it. It's quick and easy to learn, and easy to retain, and easy to implement, because what they told us was they were actually kind of chuckling and laughing. They're like, martial arts, self-defense, that doesn't really affect us because we know what's coming.
You're listening to ChristianLivingRadio.com.
We do have a caller as well with us that has experienced this firsthand. If caller, you'd like to jump in at any time or add to it, tell us what you've experienced. I've also had our neighbor, not my neighbor, but my son's best friend's neighbor was sexually abusing his own daughter.
And that's just right down the street in your neighborhood.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yep.
So, caller, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. If you'd like to jump in or tell us what you experienced, it's a great time to do so. And I hope you're hearing some of this great information being shared.
Yeah, I can hear some of it. It's a little muffled, but I experienced this with my child. And I've been listening to a lot of the conversation about how it happens and why it happens, and with the abductions and the abuse, and I will say that my child was raised in Scottsdale in a middle class upscale neighborhood, and was raised in church and had this so-called white picket fence life, and things happen. Children grow. So it doesn't always happen in families with children that are abused, physically or sexually. But our children grow up, they become teenagers, they have minds of their own. Parents are the enemy at that point in life with the hormones going. But I will say that it can happen, and it can happen anywhere. It can happen in the mall, especially these days. You were talking about cyberspace. Social media, and it's a problem. They wake up, and that is their job. They pray for our children. They pray for young girls and young boys who may have a grudge or certain wording, or find that they're not happy, or they look and see how they're dressed, and they groom them. They're there to groom them, to get the attention of that child. And a lot of times it's made to seem like a better world, or that something else is going to happen, and really truly they're out there to take your child, to abduct your child, and to force them into something they have no idea what they're getting into. But it's really a hard place to be as a parent, when you thought you were doing everything right.
I can imagine how painful.
Or long-lasting. And I would say one thing that I think is really important to me, and it's